Ever since they grabbed power in Afghanistan, Taliban has been imposing harsh laws on women. In the latest of the series of their draconian laws in the women, Taliban has banned females from speaking in public. Women are supposed to cover themselves entirely. They cannot even show their eyes. They cannot even look at men who they are not related to. Hello, guys. I am Annu Kaushik, and joining me today is Mariam Solaimankhil. Hello, Mariam. Welcome to my channel, Justin by Annu.
Thank you, Annu, for having me.
Mariam is an Afghan lawmaker. She is an Afghan lawmaker who's currently in exile. She left Afghanistan on the eve of the fall of Kabul on 15th of August 2021. Now, Mariam, my first question to you is, how do you see these new laws by the Taliban, and how do you think they'll impact the women in Afghanistan?
Well, none of these laws are surprising to us. I think the Taliban tried to rebrand themselves as the Taliban 2.0 and show that they have changed and they've become more modernized or more civil. But as an Afghan, I know who they are. I think every Afghan knows who they were, and it's no surprise to us. But it's hard every single day. I think every Afghan around the world is heartbroken watching our sisters being oppressed, watching our sisters in danger, watching our sisters not have a place to go if they need help, not even be able to walk out of their house without a chaperone. And if they are, a new law has been now announced that they'd be fined 40 apps. And this doesn't go for foreigners, of course. It's only for Afghan women who might have no choice. They might have. We had one of the largest wars. We might have. We have many widows. We probably have the largest population of widows globally. And so now you're telling me that these women who have no male in their family, every time they leave their house, they're going to be fined 40 apps. Or if their voice is heard, they're going to be maybe arrested. So it's heartbreaking.
Now, Mariam, you have friends in Afghanistan, you have families in Afghanistan, you're in touch with the people there. How is how are people coping up with this scenario?
They have no choice but to survive. They can't even complain. Where is there an outlet for them to complain safely? Is there media in Afghanistan? Is there human rights in Afghanistan? Is there amnesty in Afghanistan? There's no one there to listen. There's no safe avenue for Afghan women to voice what's really happening on the ground. The only people they have are the people who are outside right now. So they contact myself, they contact other people. I think every person who's now in exile is connected to people on the ground. So their voices are unbelievably important because it's building years of trust with someone. It's family. It's bonds that can't be easily made. So they're able to come and voice their issues and what's been happening on the ground to us. And from what we hear, it's horrible. There's security. Yeah, the Taliban stopped killing people because they were given a country, but now they're tortured in a different way. And the killing hasn't even stopped. If we look at our ANDSF soldiers who fought on the front line for years, we have countless videos of them being publicly executed, humiliated, murdered. So that's happening on that site. And I don't think many people have the courage. Well, it's not courage. They're living in fear. They're surviving. So I don't think many people want to have another person die just because they're able to tell their story, or a child to lose their mother, to lose because they told their story of what's happening. But once we see that the international community supports more and they are giving a safe outlet for Afghan women, I'm sure that you will hear countless stories of what's happening on the ground.
Now, speaking of the international community, do you think there has been a lack of outrage among world leaders, among international community, given the massive tragedy that is going on in Afghanistan in terms of human rights?
Yeah, I think that there's so much going on in the world right now that people want to brush what's happening in Afghanistan under the rug. But we can't. It's going to have long-term repercussions. First and foremost, I'm very disappointed in the Islamic world, because you're watching the Islamic world allow, like Saudi, they're allowing women to drive now. There's women are becoming more equal. You're seeing that women from the Arab world are proud of their historical clothes and their fashions and their education, and you're seeing ministers and ambassadors all over the Islamic world, and they don't think that this is concerning. The Taliban are claiming that they're the only Islamic country in the world. And so this is a very uh, new, and it's also a very extreme version of Islam that was made in Pakistan. It is what it is, and it's been made for decades. And so, to believe that this is only going to stay in Afghanistan is very naive. This will spread to other countries, and you'll see it first in Islamic countries. There are people who are as extreme as the Taliban, and it is going to motivate other extremist organizations around the world. They defeated a world power and the NATO allies that they had. So now other extremist groups are as motivated as the Taliban are. So it's actually terrifying. You're going to see it in the Middle East. You're going to start seeing it after that pour into Asia, pour into Europe and the U.S. So the fact that they want to brush it under the rug is a bad strategy, and it's naive, and we're going to see global repercussions because of it.
Now, many West, as you said, many countries are looking at what's happening with women in Afghanistan as part of a larger picture. They are thinking that Taliban will be able to maintain certain degree of security in Afghanistan. But as the recent Kabul bombing has shown us, that the Taliban is also not being able to take care of the security situation in the country. Anything you have to say on that?
Well, we have to look at Afghanistan's strategic location. I think that's our major issue. And I think we all recognize that. On one side, we have Russia. On one side, we have China. On one side, we have Pakistan. On one side, we have Iran. And in 2024, most of the conflicts that are happening around the world are all proxy. So the Taliban are being used as a proxy force as well. And there's other forces that are being brought to Afghanistan to destabilize it even more. So the Taliban have their hands full, and they're trying to keep different sides happy. Now, do they want to keep the West happy, or do they want to keep these extremist groups happy? And as we've seen, and through these laws, I think what is a priority to the Taliban is keeping Islamic extremist groups happy and being legitimized in their eyes before the US or Europe or anywhere else.
Exactly. So you're saying that these harsh laws that Taliban has imposed on women is also part of their attempt to gain legitimacy amongst extremist groups.
Yes, yes, definitely. That's why women aren't allowed to get education. They lied to the United States, but when have the Taliban ever told the truth? So the legitimacy amongst extremist groups is more important to them than the rest of the world, or even Afghan women, or the Afghan people. The Taliban haven't yet been legitimized by the Afghan people or recognized by the Afghan people.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the US, in 2021, when the US was holding Doha talks with Afghanistan, now at that point of time, Taliban had made certain promises. But what's happening right now in Afghanistan is not surprising to anyone because this is what the Taliban had done in their previous regime. Yet the US went ahead with this deal. What do you want to say on that?
Um, it's heartbreaking. Imagine telling someone who's a Jewish person that the U.S. or the world decided to give the Nazis a second chance because they've changed. I don't know. It's hard for me to grasp why the Taliban were given a second chance to rebrand themselves. And now we're seeing that it was a lie. I don't know why, and I think every Afghan is confused. And I don't think it's going to be easy for the Afghan nation to ever trust the United States again because of this betrayal. They betrayed over 20 million women. They betrayed millions upon millions of young people. So 100% of that nation has been betrayed to what the direction that we were going and where we are right now. Um, it's You took a regime that was publicly executing people in a football field, and you gave them a chance. You took a regime that was oppressing 50% of a nation just because of the gender that they were born as, and think that it's okay in 2024. There is no excuse for it whatsoever. The only thing I can compare it to is if tomorrow the United States decided to give the Nazis a second chance. So it's just as huge of a betrayal for the Afghan nation.
Now, there has been a lot of outrage over what the Taliban has been doing. Do you think it's also time that we start calling out countries which have supported Taliban over the years?
Yeah, I definitely. I think we really need to talk about what the U.S. did. I think we really need to talk about what the NATO allies did and how they whitewash them and how they don't bring this to attention. We're looking at, let's just speak about the women alone. It's over 50% of the population. That's over 21 million women who are right now being oppressed. When people tell me this is the largest women's rights issue in the world, that's a joke to me. What do you mean women's rights? Are women not considered human? Are we not considered human? This is the largest human rights crisis on the planet right now, and it's being brushed under the rug. And why? The Afghan government was created in a way that it would be easily collapsible. And I really want to talk about this. When Afghanistan was made, it was made by warlords, different types of officials, good people, bad people. I'm not going to name people, but it was made out of a very difficult group of people. Um, After that, there were people who came from abroad, from Pakistan, from India, from Europe, from Russia, from the United States, like myself. We all came back to Afghanistan in different parts of our democratic history to try to rebuild our country. Some people came and they were corrupt. Just like in every nation in the world, there's corruption. There was corruption in Afghanistan as well, which is inexcusable. But what was beautiful in all of this was it was the first time in decades, in over 40 years, that there was a generation being born and raised on that soil with a sense of patriotism, that were not corrupt, that were not ill willed. They were not working for some other country or any other agenda, but for Afghanistan, solely for Afghanistan. And they had reached that age after 20 years where they had become educated, they had gone to some of the best universities in the world, and they were slowly getting into the government. So at 20 years, imagine that at the exact 20-year deadline is whenever certain neighboring countries decided that this was the time that Afghanistan needed to collapse. Because if Afghanistan was given an ample amount of time, that new generation is who I really believed in, truly believed in. And I think as soon as they were coming in, the government was going to get a new light, and we were going to start seeing beautiful things happen in that country. But we also have to remember that through the last 20 years, Afghanistan was building itself, building its roads, building its capacity, having one of the highest percentages of women in parliament, female ambassadors, female businesswomen, artists, everything, while we were fighting the largest war in the world before Ukraine. So I'm proud of what we did during the time of the democracy. I think that everyone who was corrupt, I think anyone who did any type of treason towards our country should be held accountable. But I'm still proud of what our women and men did throughout the years, and I do think that we have a treasure of young people who can rebuild this country again.
Now, speaking of countries which destabilized Afghanistan, for long in the past, you have called Taliban a proxy regime of Pakistan. Now we're also seeing rising terror attacks happening in Pakistan, especially in provinces, in the province which borders Afghanistan. Any message that you have for Pakistan?
Well, you reap what you sow. They made this. They've built 40,000 madrasas. They've taken the people that I've represented, the Kuchis. We're nomadic and we go across the Duran line all the time. People from the Pashtun ethnic group. They've brainwashed them. They've killed our tribal elders. They've built 40,000 madrasas along the border, brainwashing them about what Islam is, what the ISI version of Islam is, and how Afghans weren't real Muslims, and how Muslims around the world in Indonesia and Malaysia and these other places, they're not practicing the real Islam. Only they are, and they've kept them poor, they've kept them oppressed, they've kept them um, without resources, purposely. They've oppressed the Pashtun people, they've oppressed the Baluch people, they've oppressed the Sindhi people, and then they weaponize them against Afghans, they weaponize them against other countries, they weaponize them against their own people. So now what you're seeing is that those same brainwashed people, which some of them are including Punjabis, including every ethnic group, they're realizing that, wait a minute, Pakistan has had more sinning and more things that are haram within their own borders than Afghanistan ever did. And look at what the Afghans, what the Taliban did. They were able to take over that entire government and defeat the U.S. Why can't we? So having a state that's as insecure as Pakistan hold nuclear weapons is actually terrifying. I'm a staunch believer that the nuclear weapons should be managed by a different country or a different organization, because it's dangerous. What if it falls into the wrong hands? And Pakistan is I don't know. They made their situation what it is today. No one is to blame about in regards to the security situation in Pakistan other than ISI and the military establishment.
And it's not just about Pakistan, like keeping Pakistan aside. If we look at the security situation again, what do you think will be the consequences of Taliban rule in Afghanistan on the overall global security?
I think that this is going to spill over in a really terrifying way. I think we're going to start seeing it in the Islamic world. I think you're going to start seeing extremist organizations look at the Taliban as heroes, as the only Islamic country in the world, and misuse this homemade version of Islam that the Pakistan's ISI has made for the Taliban. And you're going to start seeing different extremist political factions in different Islamic countries take advantage of it, try to make it their own and say, you know what, we don't have a full Islamic country like Afghanistan does now, which is not even is the Taliban regime. The Afghan people don't recognize the Taliban, by the way. They have yet to recognize the Taliban. But once we start seeing that happen, it's going to be terrifying. And it will. It's going to spill over into the Islamic world, and from the Islamic world, it's going to spill into the West. It's going to spill into India. It's going to spill into Asia. Their goal is not just Afghanistan, and you can see that whenever they're building a faction of their military that's just based off of suicide bombers.
Okay. Finally, Mariam, going back to from where we started, speaking of the Afghan women, now Afghan diaspora has been very vocal about women rights. How do you think that the rest of the world in general, common people, like let's say in other countries, how can they help the Afghan women?
Raise your voices. First and foremost, raise your voices and support other Afghan women who are outside. The women inside can't speak, but every Afghan is still connected to Afghan women. And just because we're born women, we're the natural opposition to the Taliban. The Taliban are so afraid of women that they can't even fathom hearing our voices on the street. They came out with a law recently that women can't even have their voices heard when they're outside. So they're terrified of women. And what the international community should do is raise their voices to their government and demand that if anyone is going to speak with the Taliban, which I don't even think it's worth speaking to the Taliban, but if a country is going to send representatives to speak to the Taliban, it should only be women.
Okay. Now, Mariam, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.